This video is a continuation from part one, the first video in the series for part one in order to complete the green utility shed. So as you take a look at this video, we have our, with on the screen here, we end up having our four walls. If I zoom in here, so I'm within the elevation markers, so we all see that. In a moment, I'll move to those elevation views to see some changes. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in here on our structure that we have, our beginning of our structure so far. I'm going to go ahead and select the south wall here. One thing you'll notice is you have witness lines. So the footprint of our green utility shed is going to be 12 foot by 16 foot. And in order to do that, we want to make sure that the outside footprint. So right now these blue grips are moving to the center of the wall and not to the exterior of the walls. So in order to do that, it's just a simple click and release, left click and release. That moves the witness line to the outside. And I'll do the same thing down here at the bottom. So you'll notice that with that, the dimension changed a little bit. The blue temporary dimension can be modified by typing in a value. So for here, I'm going to go ahead and type in 16. So 16, anytime you type in a number and do not just type in a certain value, it will automatically default to feet. So this will be 16 feet. And then the other one that I'll look at is I will end up clicking on the west wall. Same scenario, I will toggle the grips to the outside. And I will change that to 12 feet on the measurement. So now I'm going to zoom out here. Sometimes the structure kind of shifts or adjusts in the drawing area. I'm going to highlight to select everything, and then if you notice, your mouse cursor will have a four-headed arrow on it. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click and I'm going to drag. Go ahead and place that right in the middle. It's kind of just designer's preference at this point, but to me, I always like to have the structure right in the middle. In order to go through and keep these dimensions. Now those were temporary dimensions. So if I select this wall again, so this is 12 foot. If I want to lock it to make it a permanent dimension, I can go ahead and select the little icon below the value. And now I've got a 12 foot dimension there. I'm going to do the same thing for the 16. Now, one thing that you'll see is in order to make sure we can still drag the walls if we wish, even though that's a permanent dimension. So that's what's going to show up on the screen. So the permanent dimensions actually show up with a value on the screen, a dimension. I'm going to hit undo. And in order to lock that into place, if I select the dimension line, I'm going to click the little lock to lock that dimension in place. So now if I try to move this, it moves the entire structure as opposed to going through and elongating the dimension in certain values. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing for the 12 foot and lock that into place. From here, we will take a look at the elevation views. So remember I moved this right in the middle of the elevation markers. I'm going to double click on the east elevation. You're going to see here's our structure. And the one thing I'm going to do here is right now by default Revit puts all wall heights to 20 foot. And we're going to be adjusting some of those different components there. So I'm going to go ahead and move though and change the roof level so to 8 foot. So in order to do that, I'm going to select it, and then on the 10 foot measurement, I'm going to click again, type 8 and hit enter, and that will adjust the height of our elevation for the roof. So later on we will take a look at editing those wall heights to make that happen. All right, a few things to take a look at. I'm going to go ahead and go back to our floor plan. A few things that we can take a look at. First off is we end up having, I'm going to right click and say cancel, so to get out of any active tools. Up here in the quick access toolbar we have the default 3D view. This can also be found under the view tab and in the create panel. So I'm going to go ahead and click on default 3D view. If you hit the drop down menu by chance, you'll end up seeing you do have camera and walkthrough, which are other views that can be created, but just select the default 3D view. Okay, right now here you're going to end up seeing also here are our levels. This is kind of a newer feature in the most recent versions of Revit. So I'll show you here in a moment where we can keep those on, or we could also go through and toggle those off if we like. So here's our wall. If we want to look at that, a few navigation tool, we end up having our view cube. So if you click the home button, it'll go through and size the screen up to what you have there. So that includes these level markers. So you can click and drag on the view cube to spin this around. You can end up utilizing something known as the full navigation wheel. And when you click to place that, so it kind of follows you around. But when you have your mouse there, you can zoom. So that'll zoom in and out, so the steering wheel. You can also do that utilizing the middle mouse button on your mouse as well. So your mouse button, wherever your mouse cursor is, that's where your mouse will zoom in and out from. You can end up having a center tool, dragging, centering different components. You can have rewind or orbit, so orbiting around and pivoting. So the steering wheel could be some ways like that. I'm going to go ahead and close that, so you can feel free to go through and to utilize that steering wheel as much as you want. So, but also I end up going through, I use my mouse quite a bit to do some, so as well as the view cube. So my zooming I use with the scroll wheel. In order to pan, I click straight down on the wheel and hold down, and that will allow you to pan. And that goes through and helps around with a lot of those different navigation tools. All right, so a few things that we'll look at is dragging wall edges and things like that, adjusting the height. So right now you can see from the 3D model, you can select a wall. You do have blue arrows that will go through and indicate where the ends of the wall are at. So if I click and drag on this here, I can actually drag the wall down to a certain level that I would like. I can select a wall. I can go over here into the properties palette, and I can change so here it'll have unconnected height. So right now it's defaulted at 20. I can adjust that down to 8 foot and say apply. The other thing that I can do is if I go to the east elevation, you'll see here are some of my other walls. I can click, I can drag the wall down, it will snap to the elevation marker, and there will be that wall. So you'll see there's one wall that's still not following. But probably what I'm going to do here is let me go back to the 3D view, and I will undo all 4 of those. And probably the best one to take a look at is I select one wall, I'll leave it selected, leave my mouse there, I'll press the tab key. All the walls are going to select, so I'm going to press my left mouse button one more time. It'll select all of them, but over here in the properties palette, I like to do a top constraint, and when I click inside unconnected, I can hit the drop down and choose up to level roof, and I'll say apply. So that'll adjust all the walls at the same time. So that's very efficient, but also what it does is it top constrains these walls. So if I was to go back and adjust this back to 10 foot, the walls are going to extend up to 10 foot as well. They will become 10 foot tall in height. So I will go ahead and put this back to 8 foot, and I will go ahead and click on the home button, and there we now have our walls set at the appropriate level. And we can look at the next video to do some things like adding in floors, a roof, and some of the other building components to make this look a little bit more like a utility.